Hello, we are Bigger Apple, and we're going to come in and present our final project asking the question, can we predict if a nation is happy? Our motivations for this project was to create more efficient government. To make a population happier is essentially the purpose of government, and we wanted to see if we can isolate a single factor that directly correlated to the happiness index of a country. We thought that a higher human development index, a lower income inequality, and a higher GDP per capita would increase the overall happiness level in a country. We downloaded those data sets and the happiness index from ourworldanddata.org. In fact, we got the whole idea by scrolling through ourworldanddata.org. Now, before we even began, we had major ethical concerns. Basically, a human and happiness is so individual that trying to expand this to say that, okay, this population is happy can lead to some very big oversights in data. For example, we can't isolate a man and a woman's happiness. Now, there was a research project done earlier about Malaysian youth that found out that men and women are typically happy for different reasons. Additionally, there are ethical concerns in terms of even the ways that we're using data. When you're answering a data set about the happiness of a country, I'm sorry, someone's walking into the room right now. Anyway, when you're asking the question, when you're answering questions on a questionnaire of whether you're happy or not, you don't want that to lead to policy reform. So that was also an ethical concern that we had in mind.
For the hypothesis testing portion, basically what we first said is that we did linear regression on each of the three features. And so we found out that with the Human Development Index, there was a strong positive correlation with happiness level of a given country. With GDP, there was a weaker positive correlation. And with the Gini Index, there was a weak negative correlation. And so that just proved that our hypothesis was mainly correct. We did not predict that the GDP and the Guinea were going to be as weak as they were. We also did a 2 sample t-test for each of the features, just to make sure we divided the groups up by lower and higher than the median, just to make sure that these groups did have significant difference when it came to happiness level. And you can tell by the graphs below that they did. And then we ran a multiple linear regression with all three of the features. And here we found these coefficients with Human Development Index having the highest and the most significant. And all the p-values for the linear regression and the multiple linear regression were 0, meaning that we could safely reject the null hypothesis for all of these.
Hi, my name is Li Yuan, and now I want to present the next part of our project. Can we predict if a nation is happy? So the model we're using is logistic regression. Logistic regression is the process of modeling the probability of a discrete outcome given input variables. The logistic model we are using aims to classify and predict if a country is above the threshold value for happiness based on the inputs of Human Development Index, Gini coefficient, and GDP per capita. We trained and text the model using data from 1990 to 2017, which consists of about 574 data points. Each row contains the HDI, Gini coefficient, and GDP per capita of the same country from the same year. So here is what the table looks like before and after normalization. So normalization just making all the values on the scale between 0 to 1 for more accuracy. So now we are trying to find the threshold value by taking the mean and median of the happiness index. We set the threshold value to be 0.55, which is just a little bit below both mean and median. And our model makes the label is happy, which is said to be true if the happiness index in that row is above threshold value, and false if it's below threshold value. The features we learn can be the combinations or any combination of the three factors HDI, Gini coefficient, and GDP per capita. So we use a cross-validation, fivefold cross-validation to train the overcome the limitation of a small data sets. And here's what it said like after our 5 iterations. So here we have a bar graph showing the results for the accuracies for different things we learn. Below on the x-axis, we can see the features we learned, and then the y-axis, so the average test accuracy and the highest accuracy. So our conclusion is that lower inequity level indicated by the Gini coefficient best determines if a country has an above the average happiness level, followed by Human Development Index and GDP per capita. Um, so here you can see detailed analysis is also in our report. However, we want to point out one of thing is that our GDP has a really gives a lot of false positive. So we think there might be a gradient issue here that makes our model stop learning after a while. So lastly, we also think our model is limited in the following aspects. The first thing is very obvious. We have a really small data set, which is only like 574 data points. So even after our 5 iterations, it's only about like 200, 2000 and 500, which is still small. Also, for the binary classification, we think happiness might not cannot be determined as or solved as a binary problem because it is really hard to clearly define, what is happy and what is not happy. It's not something that is just like black and white. So if we are able to predict the actual value of the happiness index, we will be much better. Also, we think determining the threshold value can be really subjective and arbitrary. And lastly, logistic regression only constructs linear boundaries and assumes linear relationship between the dependent and independent variables. So if we have more complicated models and neural network, it would be much better for our model.